Startup Stories, and this is a series of interviews. Those gritty, innovative entrepreneurs who share their entrepreneur journey, their startups, their startovers. This is Daniel Bernard's story. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Rob. Real pleasure to be here.
At what point can I start calling you? I want you to talk about the start, that start for you. And sometimes starts aren't always good. Sometimes you need to make a couple things along the way to learn those mistakes. But the start for you, what was that moment that you felt like, I have a solution, let's start a company? And what was that business that you started?
Okay, I'll tell you what, you used the word the start, so I'm going to go right back to the start. And I'm going to talk about the first business I created back in 98, I think it was, which was an enormous failure. I was 23, 24. And there's no need to go into what it was for. It was around activities for children. I thought I had this great idea. I got it all wrong. And the important thing I think for me was I was working in a corporate job straight out of university, which was an industry that was interesting, but I didn't like the place at all. And I just wanted to get out, and my wheels started turning immediately. And I'd worked with children a lot between the ages of 17 to 22, summer camps, things like that. And I saw things that I could do better, things that I could give value, and had lots of great ideas. And I went and left that company and set up my company. It was actually in the south of France to provide activities for children. And I got it totally wrong. But obviously, I'm looking back, I'm so happy for that, because it led me on a journey of many other personal and professional, not only achievements, the up and down, the roller coaster. I've been so happy to have ridden that roller coaster up till now. And I always think I'm in the middle of my journey now as well. I'm continuing to ride. It wouldn't have happened if it wouldn't have been for that first failure. And that first failure wouldn't have been because of who I am, which I'm just thinking out loud when you're talking about why that was. I think I have this inherent view of, I've got an entrepreneurial spirit, definitely. That wasn't learned, it's inherent with me. But I think that what really pushed me to do it and hasn't left me, even though I failed, is that I've got an inherent lack of fear for what I don't know. And I don't think I realized that at the time, but looking back on my life, that's always been, I think, my greatest asset. I know people who are a hell of a lot cleverer than me. They've got great skills that I don't have. But what holds people back a lot is fear of the unknown. They go, oh, but what if? For me, what if is completely irrelevant, because I realized that we don't know so much. And when I talk to young people now, and I realized this when I was a young person without understanding it to that level, is, well, we only see a small slice of life. So there's so much we don't know. So why should we even bother with it? You could take it to two directions. You could say it either scares me more because there's so much out there I don't know, or you could say, well, if I don't know, why should I deal with what I don't know? Let's go find out. And that's been my direction all the time, is I don't worry about what I don't know. So I'll plan, but I'm always open to changing my plans as soon as I find something new, and if I get some new information. So I think that was the main trigger at the beginning, is that character of being entrepreneurial and really not caring about what I don't know. Just step forward anyway.
Yeah, I mean, so many things that what you don't know, and how you're formed and your mindset. A lot of it starts sitting at the table with our parents and being around them and what their expectations are of us. And a lot of times they try to rub their journey or their lack of journey or their regret in life or their insecurities, and you have to have this type of future. What was it for you when you watched your parents, when you watched them work and you watched when you think about that, because there's a part of us from them, from that part. What was those lessons in life? Did they tell you to jump off that cliff and start that? Were they happy that you did that, and were they supportive, or were they like, you got to get a job? You got to get a job. I mean, how did that happen in your life?
So I think that, first of all, I'm very, very fortunate. My mother and father are two very different people, but I think I'll go even further back. One of the big tools that I got from my background is, I'm a picture of diversity. My mother was born in India to Iraqi parents. My father was born in England to a Polish father and a Russian mother who met in Germany and escaped before the war. Okay. I'm now married to a woman who is Yemenite on both sides, and I live in Israel. I am like walking diversity. It's unbelievable. And this means growing up in that with that background, it just means that I accept everything. I accept all people because it doesn't really matter. It's just they're people and they're interesting, and I can interact with everyone on a level just naturally because that's who I am. Really, it doesn't. And I feel that a lot of people are lacking that in life. They get blocked if it's outside of their comfort zone. If if you're American and only in America, then it's difficult. You have to get used to another culture. That's normal. Whereas I'm sort of used to other culture, other stuff. When growing up, my parents had their own business, and my father was very orderly, very English in his manner and his way of doing things. My mother, who I think was probably an enormous influence on my life, she was very much, well, the sky is not the limit. Normally, it's like, well, you can just do anything. And people always, my mother's like tiny, she's like 4'11", and people always said you could always hear her before you see her, and she'd get into any door. It's incredible, and she would be leading initiatives for charity and doing lots of things, and because she didn't see any limitations. And I think that, when you ask me that question, I've picked up a lot from her, because she obviously intuitively gave me that support to just do anything. And definitely thanks to her guidance and her drive, I went and tried a lot of stuff, almost anything. So definitely from where I grew up, and I'm extremely.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. I love the fact that you could hear her before you could see her. That's
everyone said that, by the way. Seriously, everyone said, "Oh, you can always hear your mom before you see her."
Oh, here she comes again. Watch out.
Exactly.
So talk about that. Talk about all the places that you've been, and like, how did one connect to the other, connect to the other, connect to the other?
Well, I mean, like everyone says, you can always connect them looking back. You can't connect them going forward, which I think is a real important lesson for young people in life. It's like people trying to overplan. Please know that you can't overplan. You don't know what's going to happen. COVID taught us this in a big, big way. So, I mean, I could look back and say, sure, I moved to Israel in '99. I had an English teaching business, which was going quite well. I decided to drop that because it didn't suit me. I went and worked in sports broadcast, which I loved and solidified me in Israel. That led me to an opportunity setting up my own data analytics company in 2004, which led me to a sports betting opportunity in 2015. I would never have known that in advance. These things all followed the next because I was always just walking into the next place. Now, my ability to walk in a wiser way has improved with experience. That's just natural. And so you make less mistakes. I still make mistakes, but it's like when you ski. If you never fall down, it means you're not really pushing yourself. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's just because I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie that I use that analogy. But if you don't walk along that road, you won't see what's out there. And so when I tell you about those dots, and then that led me to meeting up with people in various venture capital companies to become an investor. And I now do angel investing on my own, or I go through VC firms into sports, which is close to my heart. It's all because of the previous step or combination of all the previous steps leading you to where you are. And I never would have been able to say back in '99, I'm going to go to Israel and I'm going to then start in sports broadcast. And that's going to lead me, when I say that, it's obviously ridiculous to even say that. But sometimes people think that life should be like that, but it's not. So just think logically about what you want to do and who you want to be, and just go for it. And then be ready to change, which is pretty much what I did. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But even the things that don't work, you learn from them and you move on.
I think the key thing you just said is decide on who you want to be, because that matters more than anything else, right? Because you're going to switch jobs, you're going to switch industries, you're going to try startups, you're going to work for yourself, you're going to try working for somebody else, and you're going to move, you're going to relocate. You're so, like, but what I've learned along our journey, my wife and I, because we have reinvented ourselves many times, all for the most part in the same industry, but we met great people, right? We figured it out. We've met lifelong friends that were neighbors or people that we worked with, and we learned something more about ourselves. And we also learned that it's always going to be okay if your intentions are right. If you're chasing something, not running away from something else, everything always falls into place.
Right there, because a lot of people would say, that's crazy to think things will always work out. But if you have your core value right, which when you're 20 years old is not exactly that easy to figure out, and you shouldn't overthink it as well. But if you realize who you are and what's important, then you will be connected to the relevant people that can work together with you to fulfill yourself. And And that's the key. So I totally agree with
Talk
you on
about that
So
part of it of so
what
talk
did
about
you
that
personally,
personally. What did Daniel learn about yourself when you're kind of taking that next step, the next step, the next step? As you look back at those things that you said, you could just never predict about how your life's going to shake out. What are those things that you look back and you see yourself and how you've maybe become somebody that you didn't think you were going to become? What are the things that you're most proud of how your life has turned out thus
well, I
far?
mean, I honestly say with all honesty, I'm extremely blessed. I really am. Um, I think that given who I was as a 22, 23-year-old who thought he knew a lot, or probably thought he knew it all, was a bit arrogant. I needed to have the wind taken out of me to gain wisdom, to grow into something a little bit more normal. Normal is not the right word, a little bit more mature. And I feel that that's happening all the time. I can honestly say that with my character, if I didn't have, and I think a lot of us can say this, a really strong, good woman by my side who knew how to give me all the support in the world, but tell me, Daniel, stay grounded because, I had an ego and I still have an ego. It's just finding a way to leverage it in positive ways. I sometimes see myself as this balloon that could have gone off in different directions, but my wife has been there guiding me to allow me like as much string as I want. But if I'm going to go off in a place that's maybe counter to my values and not really what I should be doing, she'll give me a tug. Yeah. And I think that that's been critical for me in learning much more about how to be the best I could possibly be. And uh, it's not right for anyone listening to this to think, oh wow, Daniel's succeeded in this. He's done amazing things. I've been fortunate to do amazing things, but I've been very, very lucky with timing and people I've met along the way. And I think anyone who gets to a certain amount of success, however you want to define that, if they think it's all down to them, they're totally delusional. We need a good dollop of luck in life, and I'm very, very thankful for that. And as I say, making sure that I've been staying true to various values. Going back to the previous question, which has been a lot of help from my wife with that, has been key. I think to being as best as I possibly can. I think that I've still got a way to go. As I say, I'm only in the middle of my journey anyway.
For my business, what would those three tips, those three key components be for anybody? I want to be able to monetize what value I bring to the marketplace. How do I start? And what are the three things that I do first?
Okay, so again, I'm going to use myself as a wrong example with my first business. And you use the word solopreneur. So in that first failed business in France that I spoke about before, I was on my own. And I was arrogantly on my own as well. And I think that it's really important to understand, again, that you don't know everything. So you've got to talk to people, but you've got to talk to relevant people. There's no point asking your mum, do you like this? Do you like this business I've set up? She'll go, of course. She's not objective. You've got to talk to relevant people, and you've got to reach out to people who can be of value to you in a mentoring sort of capacity that can say, this is what I think of your idea, but maybe change it like this. And there's no market for this, but have you thought about this? And you pick up pieces of information. So you've got to talk to relevant people, not just anyone. And that's thinking about reaching out. That's why communities such as Game Plan U are so important, in my opinion. You've got to reach out, not feel fear in reaching out to people, because you'll get a few people who will just ignore you, but then you'll get some good people who will say, you know what, I'm happy to give you a couple of minutes of advice. And people who have a lot of experience, a nugget in 2 minutes is worth the world when you're 20 years old or whatever. And I think that's the first thing, is making sure you're not alone in the information. Don't trust what you've got only in your head, because it's so limited. Okay, that's really important, let's say. That leads to market validation, which is always the classic one. Make sure you've got market validation. Again, south of France, I screwed up on that. I assumed far too much. I look back on it. I found my notebook recently I called it a business plan. It wasn't a business plan. It was just a to-do list. And I didn't know back then how to really build a business plan. And I look back on it now thinking, I was such an idiot. But that was fine. I just did. And I look at all the mistakes I made. I didn't validate my ideas at all. And had I done it, I probably never would have gone for that business, or I would have done it in a very different way. As things turned out, as I said, I'm happy it failed and my life turned out as it did. But I think market validation is really, really important. And then thinking about business or life in general as a puzzle. That's how I think about it. There's building blocks to every business. So trying to work out if I'm trying to build, I don't know, a B2C platform for fan engagement, what do I do? What are the major blocks that I got to get right? Marketing, so I've got to get a guy who knows what he's doing. Payments and settlements, that I got to get people or a function in place that know what they're doing. Break it down into blocks that when you build it together, it's like a puzzle. And I think the best entrepreneurs, the best managers are people who are like puzzle builders. They're not necessarily experts at any individual block, but they know how to put them together. So understand how to break it down, define it, and then put those together correctly.
Love it. I had an aunt who was one of my favorite aunts ever. We all have that favorite aunt. And she gave me a great advice in life, and I'll never forget this. And I'm going to ask you your best advice that you have received. So I'm going to tee it up for you. Never went to college, worked for the railroad. She was a dispatcher where you used to plug it in, get the cord and you plug it in like you see in the old time movies. The magical thing about her was she was an amazing storyteller. She was a great connector, and she was involved in the community with the political parties and with all the high school sports parent volunteer organizations. And she would always host these great parties at her house. Always. She had a pool in the backyard. And it was kind of the who's who in town was always at her house. She was no more than an operator for the railroad, but she carried a tremendous amount of respect in town, and she carried a big stick. And she used to say to me, Rob, there's three things that are important in life: your network, your network, and your network. And she goes, it's not because I like all these people. She goes, but I have access. And when I need things, I pick up the phone and I get it, and I get access to those things. When I need other people to do favors for, I have access. And it was all because I spent time building up my network. And I remember when I was 12 years old, 13, 14, she would say it constantly: network, 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 Rob. And she was 100% right. And she was an operator for the railroad, but yet she was probably in her time one of the most respected women in town.
So I told you before that my mother has been an enormous influence on me from a character point of view. But I think from an advice point of view, my father gave me some real gems, which have stayed with me forever. And it always came in the form of a quote. That's what I like. My dad always had these quotes. And so one of them that I always remember, and I think in the business world, it's so true. He always used to say, and I don't know where he stole it from, probably stole it from someone else, but he said, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Now, what does this mean? Is that, now let's think about how that can be applied. How often do we see that there's a lot of polish in business world, in the VC space? It all looks fantastic and shiny, but the reality is that there's, you can fall into the trap of thinking that everyone knows what they're doing and everyone's 100%. And who am I to go in there? Let's say as a founder, who am I, small guy, to go and talk to these fantastic VCs and executives and whatever. And the more experience you get, you realize that, there's a lot of people out there who aren't superstars. Yeah, you can sometimes feel that everyone's a superstar, but you go into some places and you think, wow, and when you get experience like so, and I consider myself a sports expert in sports data and sports betting. Those are two areas that I've just through working many, many years, you become an expert, for want of a better word, and you know what you're doing. The number of companies that I see who work in that space who really don't know what they're doing is incredible. So you realize, hang on, not everyone's an expert. And how I apply my father's quote about, in the kingdom of the blind, sometimes you really walk in, you think, I actually only need to be half an expert, a one-eyed man, to be the king here. Because so many people are walking around pretending that they know what they're doing, but they're all blind. And so if you've got one eye in the kingdom of the blind, you're king. And I see that. And I don't know what my dad was thinking when he told me that, but that's something that stayed with me. I really, really like that. So that's, I think, a piece of advice. And the other one, actually, now that I think about my father, that he always told me, and this is critical. He used to say, he asked me a question one day. He said to me, Daniel, what is the one thing in the world that doesn't matter what happens is irretrievable? The one thing you can never, ever get back. And I was thinking, I don't know how old I was, maybe 12 years old. I was trying to think, what's the one thing? And I gave him material ideas. He goes, no, you could maybe get that back through this, or maybe get that. It took ages and I didn't come up with the answer. He just looked at me and he said, it's time. And that penny dropped with me. That every moment, and it's getting harder and harder in the modern day world. There's so many distractions. We've got to take out the trash. literally from our minds, all these distractions. If we want to be the best people we want to be, think about how valuable time is and how much time we can actually waste. It's fine to play a few games here and whatever. I'm not saying not, but be aware with yourself about how you spend your time, because time is irretrievable. Once it's gone, once this day, what are we today? 20th of July? I don't know. This moment is gone. That's it. It will never come back. And I'm glad that I'm spending it with you, Rob. That's valuable. You know, I'm enjoying this. That's great. But we should be aware of that all the time, because this day ain't coming back. And it goes by like that, as people as old as you and I know. We're not kids anymore. And kids need to know this. Time is irretrievable. So that, I think, is probably the most valuable piece of advice I've got.
Great lessons. Great lessons. In the world of the blind, I've been squinting for 54 years. So
just open one eye. Just one eye.
Like I'm a pirate. Just want to be a pirate.
Yeah.
Daniel, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah. Your hair is good. I just, I'm just glad I still have my hair at 54 years old. By the way, I'm cutting all this out, so don't worry about it.
I don't know why. This is great.
Yeah, I know, but maybe I'll keep it in or put it at the end for our bloopers.